Imagine working hard your whole life, building a life for yourself, finding love, everything seems perfect, and then on Halloween night, it's all ripped away.
It's a story that grabs you right from the start.
That's the story we're diving into today, the life and death of Bessie Darling.
And we've got so much to work with, court testimonies, newspaper articles, even some local historical records.
Wow, so it's like we're piecing together a puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. Like trying to figure out what really happened on that Halloween back in 1933.
All right, let's start piecing together this puzzle then. Who was Bessie Darling?
Well, her story starts in Baltimore, but it's not a tale of privilege or anything like that.
Oh, so she came from humble beginnings.
Yeah, she came from a modest background, but there was this spark in her, this drive to make a better life.
That's inspiring.
She worked as a teacher, and then after a divorce, she found herself a single mother having to make ends meet.
Already sounds like she was breaking the mold,
Mm-hmm.
for women back then.
Absolutely. And it didn't stop there. Bessie had this incredible entrepreneurial spirit and ended up buying Valley View Manor.
Valley View Manor.
Yeah, it was this charming summer boarding house nestled in the Catoctin Mountains of Maryland.
Now hold on, buying property in the early 1900s as a single woman, that's impressive.
It really is, and it shows how resourceful she was. She used her social connections, even got financial backing from a prominent figure in Baltimore.
Really?
Yeah, a conductor named Joseph Posh who headed a musical conservatory.
Wow. So Bessie really knew how to make things happen.
She turned Valley View into a thriving business.
Okay, so she's created this idyllic life for herself, running a successful business in the mountains.
Hmm.
It seems like everything's going her way.
Right.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, this is where the story takes a turn for the worse. Enters George Schultz,
George Schultz.
a man shrouded in mystery who became a regular guest at Valley View.
Okay, the name itself sounds a little ominous.
Mhm.
What do we know about this George Schultz?
He was a former health inspector from Baltimore with rumored ties to local politics.
Local politics.
Even whispers about possible connections to the Ku Klux Klan.
Wow, that adds a whole other layer to his character.
It does. And, his relationship with Bessie wasn't exactly a fairy tale.
Oh, I bet.
There are accounts of public drunkenness, aggressive behavior, even instances where he brandished a gun.
Yikes, this is sounding less like a love story and more like a thriller.
It paints a picture of a volatile and potentially dangerous individual.
So we have Bessie, this ambitious, independent woman, and then George, this shadowy figure with a questionable past.
It really makes you wonder what drew them together.
Right. And of course, what ultimately led to the tragic events that unfolded.
Exactly.
Speaking of tragic events, it all culminates on Halloween morning, 1933, right? What happened at Valley View Manor that day?
Picture this, the crisp autumn air, leaves turning vibrant shades of red and gold, and this sense of peace settles over the mountains as Valley View prepares to close for the winter.
Sounds peaceful.
But that tranquility is shattered by a knock on the door.
It's George. Isn't it you mentioned he took a train from Baltimore to Deerfield that morning and even ominously showed his gun to the conductor?
Right, he arrives at Valley View demanding to see Bessie. He's clearly intoxicated, agitated, and refuses to be turned away.
What happens next?
According to the maid, Maisie Willard, George pushes past her and races up the stairs to Bessie's room. When he finds the door locked, he breaks it down.
I can only imagine the fear and chaos that must have ensued.
Now, the scene becomes a bit murky here. We have two conflicting accounts of what transpired in that room.
Oh, really?
The official version, based on evidence and Maisie's testimony, suggests Bessie was likely still in bed when George burst in and shot her, killing her instantly.
So a crime of passion fueled by jealousy and rage.
Possibly.
Okay.
But then we have these local rumors passed down through generations that weave a more dramatic narrative.
Really? A more dramatic narrative. What are the rumors saying?
They claim that George actually snuck in, locked himself in Bessie's room, and a confrontation took place with both of them reaching for their guns.
Wait, so both Bessie and George had guns?
That's what the rumors suggest. They paint this picture of a struggle with Bessie trying to defend herself.
Wow, it adds another layer of complexity to the story.
It does.
It sounds like the truth might lie somewhere between the official account and the whispers of local gossip.
Right. And it's fascinating how these different narratives reflect the perceptions and biases of the time.
What do you mean?
Well, in Baltimore, the focus was on George's violence, while in Deerfield, there was this tendency to sensationalize the story, perhaps fueled by their status as outsiders.
It makes you wonder how much of what we believe about the past is shaped by who's telling the story and what they choose to emphasize.
Exactly. And it reminds us to approach historical accounts with a critical eye, questioning assumptions and acknowledging the potential for multiple perspectives.
Absolutely. We've uncovered a lot already, but this is just the beginning. There's still the trial, the aftermath, so much more to explore.
Definitely stay with us as we delve deeper into the life and death of Bessie Darling and try to unravel the mysteries that still linger around this captivating case. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and death of Bessie Darling. And before we get too far into the aftermath of her tragic death, I think it's worth circling back to Valley View Manor itself.
Yeah, the boarding house definitely plays a central role in this whole story. You mentioned earlier that the area was experiencing this tourism boom at the time.
It was.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, the Katokan Mountains, were originally seen as a potential industrial hub. Lots of plans for railroads and factories and big development, but those ambitions never really took off.
So what happened? What led to the shift towards tourism?
Well, towards the end of the 1800s, you had this group of investors from Baltimore. They saw the beauty of the mountains and realized the potential. They started promoting the Katokans as a summer escape.
Makes sense. A place to get away from the city heat and enjoy the fresh mountain air. It's amazing how a place's destiny can change so dramatically from industrial dreams to a haven for tourists.
And this shift towards tourism really impacted Bessie's success. I mean, people were flocking to the area looking for a break from city life, and Valley View Manor with its charm, and Bessie's warm hospitality became a popular spot.
It sounds like Bessie had a real talent for creating a welcoming environment for her guests. Do we get any glimpses into what life was like at Valley View from the sources?
We do get some snippets of information, like Bessie was known for her cooking, especially her fried chicken, and guests always raved about the views from the manor.
Sounds lovely.
There are mentions of social gatherings, music, even dances in the dining hall.
It paints this picture of a vibrant community, such a contrast to the isolation Bessie faced later in her relationship with George.
Exactly. And it's important to remember this is all happening in a rural area during a time when women weren't always encouraged to break free from tradition.
Right.
Bessie was defying those expectations, building a business, succeeding in what was very much a man's world.
Makes her story even more impressive. But tragically, her success and happiness were cut short. We left off with George breaking into her room and those conflicting accounts of what happened next.
Right.
So after the gunshot, what happened?
Well, in the midst of the chaos, George tries to take his own life.
Oh, wow.
He shoots himself in the chest, but the wound isn't fatal.
So he's found alive at the scene.
Yes, the sheriff arrives to find George bleeding at the top of the stairs and rushes him to the hospital. He eventually recovers.
And then I imagine the arrest and the trial.
Exactly. The trial begins in March 1934, and it becomes this battle of narratives. The prosecution presents a case focused on premeditation.
Premeditation, how so?
Well, they highlight George's threats against Bessie, the fact that he showed his gun to the conductor and his forced entry into her room.
Strong evidence.
And what about George's defense? Did he stick to the self-defense claim?
He did, but his story starts to unravel under scrutiny. He claims Bessie threatened him with her own gun, but her gun is found with the safety on and not even in her hand. Sounds like a desperate attempt to evade responsibility.
It does, and the jury doesn't buy it. They reject the self-defense plea and find him guilty of second-degree murder.
What was the sentence?
18 years in prison.
18 years. That seems light for taking a life.
It does raise questions about the justice system at the time and how domestic violence cases were handled. And as we'll see, there's another twist. George ends up serving only half his sentence.
Well done. He only serves 9 years for murder. How is that possible?
Well, while he's incarcerated, George applies for parole, but is initially denied. Then in 1940, the governor of Maryland, Herbert O'Connor, introduces this new parole system aimed at more lenient sentencing.
So George benefited from a change in policy.
It seems that way. Governor O'Connor personally reviews a number of cases, including George's. He initially denies parole, but then later, for reasons that are unclear, grants George's release in 1943.
That's surprising, considering the nature of the crime.
It really highlights the complexities of the justice system. Parole decisions involve various factors: the crime, the prisoner's behavior, their perceived rehabilitation. We can only speculate on the specific reasons for George's early release.
And to add to the mystery, he dies just a year later.
That's right. In 1944, from unspecified causes, it leaves us wondering if his death was connected to the self-inflicted gunshot wound or illness or something else entirely.
So many unanswered questions swirling around this case, almost like echoes of the past refusing to be silenced.
And those echoes extend beyond George's fate. What about Bessie's son? What happened to Valley View Manor?
Let's unravel those threads next. So we've been exploring this tragic story of Bessie Darling, uncovering so many layers to this case.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, let's talk about what happened after the trial and the ripple effects of Bessie's death.
Okay.
We were just talking about George's early release and his death a year later. What about Bessie's son, Wesley? What became of him?
Unfortunately, the historical records mainly focus on the events surrounding the murder and trial. Information about Wesley's life is limited. We know he was only 19 when his mother was killed, and that he really tried to keep Valley View Manor within the family.
Yeah, that was such a powerful gesture. Buying back the property from the bank and then signing it over to Bessie's parents.
It really shows his character and the respect he had for his mother's legacy. It's sad to think that he lost both parents within such a short time.
It really is. And then Valley View Manor itself, what happened to the boarding house after Bessie's parents were unable to keep it going?
It ended up becoming part of the national park system.
Wait, how did that happen? I thought Bessie owned the property.
Well, there's a detail we haven't mentioned yet. Remember Joseph Posh, the conductor who helped Bessie buy Valley View?
Yeah, the one who headed the musical conservatory.
Right. So it turns out that when Bessie bought Valley View, it was technically with a loan from Posh.
A loan.
Sadly, Posh passed away a few years before Bessie's murder, and the ownership of the manor defaulted to his heirs in Germany.
So even though Bessie was running the boarding house for years, she didn't fully own it.
It seems that way, and when Bessie died, Posh's heirs weren't interested in claiming the property, which led to its foreclosure. That's how Wesley was able to buy it back, albeit briefly, before passing it on to his grandparents.
It's like this beautiful place, Bessie's dream, got caught up in this legal web and just slipped away.
In a way, yes, and when Bessie's parents could no longer manage the property, they signed it over to the state in 1936.
1936.
It became part of what was known as the Katoken Recreational Demonstration Area.
The Katoken Recreational Demonstration Area.
I don't
I'd
know.
never heard of that.
It was part of a New Deal program, aimed at creating recreational spaces for the public, particularly in rural areas.
So Valley View Manor went from this bustling boarding house to a piece of history preserved for future generations.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even in the face of these personal tragedies, history marches on, and sometimes even intimate spaces become part of a larger narrative.
It makes you wonder how many stories those mountains hold, stories of dreams, ambition, and loss.
Speaking of stories, let's take a moment to reflect on Bessie's legacy. What stands out to you about her life?
What strikes me most is her courage and determination. I mean, she was a single mother who built a successful business at a time when women faced so many obstacles. She was a trailblazer, really defying societal expectations.
Absolutely. Bessie's story is a testament to the power of the human spirit, the ability to overcome adversity and achieve amazing things, even with all those societal constraints.
But it's also a story that leaves us with some lingering questions. What might her life have been like if she had lived in a time and a place that fully embraced and supported strong, independent women?
That's a powerful thought. What might she have accomplished if she had been given the same opportunities and respect as men?
Right, and it makes you wonder how many other Bessie darlings were out there. Women whose stories remain untold, whose potential was limited or even extinguished because of the societal norms of their time.
It is a sobering thought, but it's also a call to action. Bessie's story reminds us to challenge those norms, to advocate for equality, and to celebrate the achievements of women throughout history.
We've covered so much in this deep dive. We've explored Bessie's journey from Baltimore to the Katoken Mountains, her success as a boarding house owner, the tumultuous relationship that led to her tragic death, and the impact that event had on her family and the fate of Valley View Manor.
It's a story filled with ambition, love, betrayal, and loss. But above all, it's a story about resilience, about the human spirit striving for a better life, even when facing unimaginable challenges.
Bessie Darling's life may have been cut short, but her legacy lives on. It encourages us to question assumptions, to seek the truth amidst the rumors and half-truths, and to remember that history is made up of countless individual stories, each one a testament to the complexities of the human experience.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to leave you with this thought. What can we learn from Bessie's story that we can apply to our own lives? How can we honor her legacy by fighting for justice, equality, and the freedom to live authentically?
Thank you for joining us on this journey through time, uncovering this forgotten story, and giving a voice to this remarkable woman whose life was tragically cut short.